very often that you see India being referred as the emerging economic superpower, and rightly so. But what I believe truly is that India is the future, where talent will come from. I talk about India, it's like a global superpower of talent. India, I think, won't just contribute talent to the world, but also will help shape global leadership. Gives students a choice now. It's a choice which is very empowering, and again, gives them that control on what they want to do, how they want to contribute to the society. So yeah.
Yeah, to the report, you've described India as the next center of gravity for global learning.
This is the best time to be a student. I don't think we're in a moment where opportunities are no longer distant. Everything is around you.
So good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to bring you on next episode of Education, Keeping It Real, brought to you by Youth United Council of India. I'm Lottie Hill, the Director of International Partnerships, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a very special and internationally renowned guest, Sagar Bahadur, who is the Executive Director Asia and Head of Regional Strategy for Acumen, which is part of Sannam S4. So good morning, and thank you so much for joining me. Although I say good morning, it's afternoon where you are.
Good morning and good afternoon from India. Thank you, and such a pleasure to be here speaking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We are in this series, as you're aware, we are bringing cutting edge topics to Indian students in particular who are looking at their future educational choices, who potentially are looking at either staying in India, going abroad. There is so much information out there and so many different options at the moment. And I think some people will be in a situation where they just kind of, need some kind of background information about what the bigger picture looks like. What are the pros and cons of each, and what is going to be available to them going forward as they make these choices. But before we start delving into the nitty-gritty of this topic, I wanted to talk about Acumen, your company, as a starting point. So I've looked on the LinkedIn profile descriptor, and I'm going to quote what it says. It says it's changing lives and accelerating growth in the education sector through globalization and innovation. And so for the benefit of the audience, I wondered if you could expand on that and give us some insight into Acumen's work and its mission for both students and educators.
Sure. Thank you. And very happy to be here once again. I think it gives me a lot of pleasure when you have to describe what you're doing. I love what I do. And let me talk about what we're doing at Acumen. So at Acumen, we work at a very interesting intersection of students, institutions, governments. When we talk about changing lives, we're really talking about access to opportunity. I think we've seen time and again how just one international exposure can, be it a program, a partnership, a classroom experience, can fundamentally change a student's confidence, the ambition, the sense of possibility. I think for me, many years ago, early in my own career, I've seen how international education not just adds a qualification, it just reshapes people, what they think about themselves. So I think it's just such a powerful tool. And when we talk about accelerating growth, I think it's also about talking about education systems, institutions. We work with universities, schools, policymakers to just help internationalize the way that education can be more thoughtful, can be more sustainable. I don't think it's limited to just sending students abroad anymore. It's just bringing global education into India and the wider region. For us, globalization, I don't think is limited to geography. It's about mindset, relevance, preparing learners for a world that is deeply interconnected. I'm very proud in my work. We get to work with over 126 international universities across the globe. We're talking about different culture, best practices, and all that then transcends into what students can benefit out. So every morning it's just really interesting to wake up and think, what more we can do. And it's very satisfying and very interesting.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So what I'd like to delve into next is a quote that I've read that you personally have said. So we all know that in economic and political terms, India is a destined superpower. But you've also described India as a global superpower talent, which sounds really exciting. So could you tell us a little bit more about what you mean about that?
Yeah, I think very often, and I think of the past few years, it's very often that you see India being referred as the emerging economic superpower, and rightly so. But what I believe truly is that India is the future, where talent will come from. We are one of the largest and the youngest populations in the world, with strengths across STEM, creativity, entrepreneurship, problem solving. And I think what stands out for me, especially in conversations with global university leaders, is the respect Indian students command. I think it's not just limited now to technical education or ability. It's more so, I think, around adaptability, resilience. I've seen more and more young Indians thrive in global complex environments because I think they're very comfortable in navigating uncertainty, which I think really becomes a strong suit when you're, taking these decisions, moving out. And I think that's something you can't learn from textbooks. So, it's a lived experience, what you get to learn, when you're born and raised in India. So like exactly what you were saying, that when I talk about India, it's like a global superpower of talent. India, I think, won't just contribute talent to the world, but also will help shape global leadership, innovation ideas. We're very proud in a lot of our discussions. We talk about the global CEOs coming from India and how they're shaping the trajectories. So some, I think, good case studies there. And that's why the belief is that, it's not just economic, but also a talent hub now for the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic to hear, that as well, because we hear a lot about, the economy and the political scene, but to actually kind of focus in on the talent that's coming out of India through our youth is absolutely wonderful. So moving back into education, I understand that you've recently been involved with the compilation of a landmark document on the internationalization of higher education in India, which I believe was commissioned by the government of India. So could you firstly, before we talk about that in more depth, go back to the core of what internationalization actually means? Because traditionally we've heard a lot about students traveling overseas for studies if they want a global experience. But this is changing now.
Yeah. I think it's a very important reset questions. More and more universities, of course, are talking about it. But I feel personally, internationalization is often misunderstood. It's no longer just about students traveling overseas. I think true internationalization is about global education becoming part of the ecosystem. And let's say in this case, the Indian ecosystem through international branch campuses, joint degrees, dual degrees, globally aligned curricula, research partnerships, and faculty mobility. So I think the discussion is more comprehensive. It's just not limited to students. And I still remember international education was largely just a one-way street. Universities were looking at students moving on and attaining a degree or qualification. But I think it's in today's world and the discussions that we're having, it's more multi-directional. Parents and schools are increasingly telling us how reassuring it is to know that students can access global education now without even leaving the country. And I think at best, internationalization gives students a choice now. It's a choice which is very empowering. And again, gives them that control on what they want to do, how they want to contribute to the society. So
yeah, so exciting times. Things are shifting, really. So in relation to the report, you've described India as the next center of gravity for global learning. How, that sounds really impressive on a large macro scale. Why should young people be excited by this, and how is it going to impact on their future prospects?
I think most importantly, Lottie, it'll fundamentally change what's possible for them. It means students can access global faculty, international networks, portable credentials while still remaining rooted in India. They can design education pathways that suit their goals rather than feeling pushed into a single definition of success. I often tell students that the question today isn't, should I go abroad? I think it's more what kind of global exposure will prepare me for my future. And I think that shift from aspirational more to outcome-led decision making is very powerful. And that's what I think we're going to experience with what's happening in India, particularly. I think it tells young people that they don't need to leave India to belong to this global community. And I think, interestingly, the more we talk to foreign universities, it's only the 2% of our higher education enrollment that goes out of India. Now, there can be reasons around cultural reasons, financial, aspirational reasons that they choose to be in India. And then 98% of 43 million students that we have in our higher education is a huge, pool of students, talent. And to empower them with internationalization here in India, I think is something which is very aligned to what the government of India wants, but also with so many shifts in the geopolitics and policy changes, I think it just gives an opportunity for universities to engage more within this segment in India. That's what we're seeing more and more happening, which is very exciting.
Do you see, I'm going to throw another question about this in. Do you see a time where there will be more international students coming in to India and there being more of a kind of globalized campus feel where we have students from different countries actually seeing India as, an Indian institutions as a good option for their own studies?
Yeah, I think there's already work going on. The report also states very clearly on how India becomes like this regional study hub. So far, I think we've been good enough to attract talent and students from South Asia, parts of Africa, Middle East, but I think the aspirations are much bigger for the government. The education quality is consistently increasing. There's a lot of work that the government and the private sector is putting in, with the ambition that at one point we'll become that epicenter for talent and students to come. I still feel there's work to be done, both in terms of just the story which goes out, but also some of the mechanics that are needed. But certainly, I think there's more and more kind of movement that way. We see short immersion programs to India, which have really, grown in numbers. We're seeing a lot of, like, as an example, we see a lot of students coming to Bangalore to see the startup, kind of ecosystem that we have. A lot of them come to see the cultural side of India as well. And I think we do have these stories that we just need to be better and attract. So I'm pretty confident that what has already started will become much bigger in times to come.
Yeah. So you say that you talk about work that's already started. Are there particular sort of regions and centers where there's already activity kind of happening? Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of where students should be looking if they want to kind of stay in India and experience this?
I think India is so large and diverse. I think it offers everything for every kind of, interest area. I was very, surprised a couple of years that we had trips, student tours coming for yoga. There was a recent trip where we had a very senior education leader from the US along with other members to know more about the weaving kind of practices in India and different states. It, of course, expands to a lot in STEM, a lot in manufacturing, a lot in supply chain to startup ecosystems. So I think there's a lot that parts of India, will offer. But though, I mean, in terms of factual numbers, you'll see more of the mobility happening in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore. So it starts with these three, of course, Hyderabad, Chennai, then to follow. And along with these, you'll have kind of secondary, movements around Jaipur, Agra, where the cultural belt starts. We have a lot of groups going to Banaras to see, the religious side and the cultural side of India as well. But I think there's equal effort going in from the private and the public sector. And I've seen a lot many trips now happening and this kind of short-term mobility happening with top private educations, just carving out more and more of this kind of an opportunity for global audience.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the other things I wanted to bring in here was how the HE sector, higher education, is going to be linking up more with industry, because I know that these conversations are happening as well. So this also opens up more opportunities for students, doesn't it? What's your take on that?
Certainly, I think the scale at what India works, the pace at which it works, I think it just is a very different experience for students to come in. So right from when they experience, the mobility of traffic to people to how the industry or the companies work, I think it's just a great experience for them to learn, how things are done in this part of the world. And again, like I said, there are major kind of manufacturing centers attracting these kind of mobility just to showcase what they're doing and how India is rising as well. And a lot of our institutions are now working closely with corporates as well. So you'll see most of these immersions will have a flavor of some part of academic, cultural, industry, coming together. And more, I think industry is also very happy to now, welcome and talk about what they do. So globally exposed as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is obviously a big, major shake-up of the system. How far away would you say that India is from realizing this goal of having an internationalized sector for universities?
So I think we are very much a work in progress. A lot is happening, but I think the most important thing is that the direction is clear. Like we know where we are going and why we are going. The milestones have been set in various policies. I think the policy reforms, the institutional openness, which I think was missing earlier at times, the student demands are aligning in ways that we haven't seen before. I think having worked across different regions, I can really say that the transformation of the skill never happens overnight. And India, at least, is moving with intent. Somebody was telling me it's like a flight 36,000 feet above, which is moving, and all these changes have to happen while you're up there. The flight can't land. So a lot is happening while we still have to keep the ship ready and steady, moving. And I think for students today, internationalization starts with mindset, curiosity, interdisciplinary thinking, cultural literacy. To be able to I think collaborate across boundaries matter as much as where you study. So I think there's a lot of that openness as well. And I think students who embrace adaptability today will naturally benefit from the systems where we're heading. So in my view, I think we're in the right direction. It's going to take some time, but it's clearly visible of the changes that we can see.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on the growing number of international university branch campuses in India? Because we hear about new ones opening quite fairly frequently now.
Yeah.
Would you say that they're a good option for students who are not in a position maybe to go overseas physically, but actually want that international experience? What's your thought on that?
So I think I had my personal opinion. I was very happy when the move came in, and finally we had international branch campuses coming and showing interest. And beyond interest, the policy enabled them to come. So I think I've been a big believer that it brings a lot of diversity, quality, push. The private sector and the Indian sector will have to now outdo itself as well, just to be there. So I'm personally, I always was very bullish about the fact that it's going to give more access to quality education. But what was interesting, Lottie, was that in our report, the next billion learners, which is basically the study of the 98% of population, Indian higher education population, that doesn't go out. I think an overwhelming 92% of them wanted internationalization in the survey. So they want internationalization. Their definition of internationalization is very different, because of whatever reason, cultural, financial, aspirational. And a big percentage of that survey, the students felt IBC is the answer for them. That's the best way to experience global education. So one was my belief, but I also feel what data showed us was that maybe that's the next big thing for them to experience. It also means a lot of responsibility back on these universities to be more responsible, to be more proactive in understanding what the students are looking for, what are the return on investments, and how they shape that journey, make them more international while they're in India. So I think there's a lot that's happening, and very positive developments, both from where I see things, but from a student's point of view as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statistic that you quoted there, that 98% of respondents were keen on an internationalized experience.
Yeah,
So that's,
yeah, 92. So 98% would never go out of India for whatever
oh,
reason.
sorry. Yeah.
And out of that lot, 92, so more than 90% wanted that, some form of internationalization happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That tells a lot about, the aspirations of those young learners. Absolutely. So, what you're doing is extremely valuable work in trying to make this a reality for them. So I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's been really eye-opening, and I think that young people who are listening to this will understand that there is so much on the horizon. Things are changing, things are shifting. The government has aspirations. The sector is really open to expanding and moving and accommodating this globalization. So that's really exciting. And students have options now. They don't necessarily, it's not just the students of the future. It's for those now that want to take advantage of it. So lots of exciting things happening in the sector. Just to conclude, really, I'm going to go slightly left side here with a question that I like to ask all of the guests that we interview for this podcast. And it is about how the future of education will be impacted by AI, because this is such a huge, ubiquitous topic right now. It can't be ignored. That is the other factor that universities will be extremely conscious of, because it could mean a huge step change in everything that universities do, how they teach, how they assess, the kind of careers they're catering for. It's a huge thing. What's your opinion on this?
I personally feel, Lottie, that I think AI will change how we learn, but not the fundamental concept of why we learn. So the routine tasks can be automated, but skills like critical thinking, ethics, creativity, collaboration, I think they'll become even more valuable. Education will shift from memorization to meaning making. And that's something that I'm seeing not just in higher education, but just with my little daughter as well, of how everything is just available at a young age, with technology. But the choices that she'll make to choose the technology and what she makes out of it, I think those skills will always still be required in what we do. I think even in my own work, I think AI has transformed how quickly all the information and everything just comes. But I think judgment, responsibility, the values that kind of person connect still, requires that kind of human connect, and that still matters for what we do. I think the students will thrive. This is not a generation that's going to fear AI. It's I think those who learn to question and to use it thoughtfully. So I think there's a lot more resilience in that kind of crowd that we talked about. And I think the future of education isn't just human versus AI. It's how we collaborate humans with AI and move forward. So I'm particularly very positive about how AI can be used to further the things that we do and how it benefits the society at large.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity out there. There's a lot of scare stories as well. People saying that whole swathes of careers will be redundant almost. But as you say, it's less about replacing and more about changing how we approach them. So universities are no doubt going to be teaching these additional skills and integrating the technology into everything they do. So yes, it's a change, but it's not a change that that young people should be concerned about. I think it's, you know, as you've said, it's something we will learn to live with, and this generation coming up will be fairly fluent in how they use that and adapt to it. So that's great.
And I think just to conclude, I feel this is the best time to be a student. Like, you know, I don't think we're in a moment where opportunities are no longer distant. You know, everything is around you. The access is very different. And I think it's much more nuanced than before as well. Like, you know, there's so much that you can do. So I think it's just one of the most exciting times to be a student. And I just hope, you know, this would have happened maybe a couple of decades back, and we would have enjoyed the same kind of, you know, opportunity.
Oh, that's great. It's lovely to finish on a very high and positive note. So thank you, Sagar. That was a really fascinating conversation, and look into how the Indian sector is adapting and shifting for a globalized future. So thank you ever so much. I really appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you, Lottie. Good experience, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.